Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ask the Expert webinar, From Dashboard to Autopilot, how SAS Visual Analytics on SAS Viya transforms the AI data journey. My name is Tiago de Souza, and I will serve as your moderator for today's event. Now, I would like to take a moment to introduce our presenter, Ted Stolarsik, a technical advisor here at SAS. Ted helps organizations tell their most impactful stories with their data. He leads customer adoption efforts in the SAS Customer Success Organization for their no-code, low-code offerings. These experiences include supporting on-premises and cloud-based solutions centered on data engineering, analytics, and visualization, including the systems, data, and user administration necessary to facilitate them. Why don't we turn things over to our presenter so we can get started? Ted, please take it away.
Thanks, Tiago. Good morning, everybody, or whatever your applicable time zone is. Although this webinar was intentionally advertised for existing SAS 9.4 Visual Analytics users, all are welcome, just as vehicle technology has evolved. For example, pre-collision throttle management, lane departure and sway warning, hands-free driving. Likewise, when it comes to analytics, augmented or automated insights, so too has Visual Analytics from the 9.4 release to the latest Viya. So thank you for that larger percentage. But by all means, I'll improvise for the rest of the audience as well. So with that, what is the significance of 2520? If Visual Analytics for Viya is like the modern day vehicle, is this the passcode to the capabilities of Visual Analytics? Well, 20. There are 20 analytic innovation features that were in the 9.4 release that are also in the Viya release. Five of those existing analytic innovation features are greatly enhanced in Viya. And then 20 analytic innovation features are brand new in Viya. Now, for those of you who aren't currently using any Visual Analytics, I took the liberty, just in case, to create an entire section here for you to go over. This will be provided on the community site for Ask the Expert in no particular order, from box plots to the ability to change the object visualization type after the fact. But in terms of details, or more details, we're going to go ahead for the purposes of this live webinar and more formally start where the 5 analytic features have been greatly enhanced, right? Just like modern cars aren't just better, they're safer, smarter, more connected, more adaptable than their older counterparts. Likewise, these particular 5 features, although they are available in the 9.4 release, have been greatly enhanced. For example, quick calculations. I consider this analytic innovation because literally with a click of a button, it builds a formula, custom expression formula. I like to call it report math. So there are 6 new ones, even though I will admit for 3 of them, you could spend the time building a highly customized formula in 9.4 to accomplish min date, max date, percent of total count. For example, convert a date to a number, do number math, take the difference, somehow figure out what the date should be and convert it back to date format. But that wouldn't be quick, would it? So thus why we have these 6 new quick calculation formula building. Data aggregations. What's highlighted in red was not doable at all in the older release, particularly the aggregated periodic, advanced, and tabular functions. And I believe you'll see or get a reference of an example of this when we get to the live demonstration. So in addition to by month, by year, by quarter, we have by day, by week, the ability to suppress data based on certain criteria, right, for privacy reasons, more on privacy later. And then all of the tabular functions are new. For example, regardless how the visual currently groups the data, you want a particular data item to be grouped exactly the way you want it by a certain categorical data item. Geomaps. Not only are there additional geospatial analysis types, not only is there more integration with Esri, some people pronounce it ESRI. For example, there's macros provided to convert those geoshapes to traditional row column formatted data. And now the end user, as opposed to before where you had to alter an installation config file, but now the end user can be given the ability to map the shapefile to the report data. And speaking of Esri, not that I'm here to sell you on something you may not currently have, but for those of you who currently have or would ever embrace the Esri Premium, Esri Cloud technology, you simply, literally supply us the user ID and password, and additional menu items just magically show up in VA, such as you see here on the far right, the ability to do demographics, among other capability. Options. Not that options in general are specific to analytics, but in addition to searching, more styling options, better accommodation for screen sizes, number abbreviation, again, which has nothing to do with analytics per se, but there's more analytical model tweaking options. By no means do I have the full list memorized, but in addition to pointing you to the doc when you receive the deck, examples include, among others, when you create new partition data items, there's different stratification options. The decision tree has new training options and visuals. Where applicable, not only having the ability to do cutoff plot, but different options for that cutoff plot. Any of the predictive modeling capabilities now have control what output displays, not displays, custom titles, things of that nature. You can change the confidence level for these predictive models, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then custom expression editor in general. It doesn't mean you can no longer do point and click low code. It just means we've made it more consistent with how expression builders are in general in the marketplace when doing, like I said, what I call report math, aggregations, row level formulas, column level formulas. What does this do with analytics? Well, because among other reasons, parameters can be within custom expressions, and custom expressions can be within parameters. So the more data-driven you can make it, the more dynamic you can make it, the more user-driven you can make it for your report viewers, the more that will be truly analytic innovation. Now, 20 capabilities of our 2520, right, how we get into the car, that are completely new in VIA. Again, in no particular order, starting with report recommendations. Your most frequently viewed reports, most frequently viewed by others, assuming, of course, you have access to them, as that wouldn't be too trustworthy, would it? Speaking of trust, now there is a privacy indicator on the data panel before you even create a visual. What makes that possible is now VIA includes, among other things, data governance technology. That in turn includes, among other things, discovery agents that analyze the underlying tables for privacy issues. So you could have a candidate for information privacy, you could have sensitive data and or private data. Report builders can also prevent viewers from data exports if private data is present. Outlier indicators, just like the SAS 9.4 release tagged correlation on the data panel, just like you saw previously, now there are privacy tags, there are outlier tags as well. And as you might imagine, outliers can impact aggregations. Speaking of aggregations, wink, wink, talked about earlier, things like average, min, max, things of that nature. Speaking of outliers, if you have at least one visual on your report page that includes at least one data item that has an outlier, there's a light bulb symbol. You won't see it here, but hopefully in the live demo. Click of a button, it builds an entire outlier story for you. It quantifies the impact of the outlier, gives you a detailed analysis, supports data-driven decisions and trust. Automated explanation, among other capabilities, now provides what I call black box modeling for people who are like me and not a true data scientist for initial data storytelling, initial modeling before you turn it over to and collaborate with a true data scientist, or if you are a true data scientist, perhaps you do this first, where it runs a series of decision trees and in natural language narratives gives you some interpretation and quick discovery of what the data is telling you. Taking that to the next level, automated prediction for all those important variables where in combination changing any of the values might change the predictive outcome. You're presented with a data entry screen, and depending on if it's a categorical response or a measure response, it runs behind the scenes logistic regression, gradient boosting, decision tree, or linear regression. Explain data from the data pane or from any visualization, right click, and another auto story builder. It'll tell you some insight about that data item in conjunction with the other data items available to the report and the visuals as you designed them on the page to accelerate root cause analysis. Again, one of the keys here is empowering non-technical users or non-data scientist users. Parallel coordinates plot. This, among some other examples, without having to go through the full data science capability, in this case cluster analysis, it opens up some of these visuals to the report viewer to do, among other things, multivariate data visualization, detect correlations, clusters, outliers, paths of data to look for pattern recognition, such as this case, the thickest flow could be this subset of the health population has certain systolic, diastolic, and gender characteristics in a more three-dimensional type manner. Once a report is built, regardless if it's analytical in nature or not, another click of a button, AI driven, it will do a report review. It'll tell you possible performance issues, accessibility issues, and some usability issues in a high, medium, low severity. And I provide you with the documentation link on what it looks for in the report. And although this isn't AI, I also point you to a site from our usability experts where manually you can compare your report versus best practices. Although it's an add-on to Visual Analytics, for those of you who currently have or could embrace the statistical capabilities, in addition to general linear model, we now have what's aptly called GAM, generalized additive model. Examples and use cases: healthcare, predicting patient length of stay, where age, vitals, lab values impact outcomes in nonlinear ways. Insurance, modeling claim frequency, where risk rises sharply at certain ages or mileage bands. Marketing, understanding non-linear effects of ad spend on conversions. Environmental science, modeling pollution impact where temperature or wind speeds has threshold effects. What was a common term phrase I used in these examples? The advantage of GAM allows non-linear, flexible, smooth functions of predictors, automatically fitting curves to capture complex patterns. Likewise, we now have non-parametric logistic regression to go along with traditional logistic regression, which required linear relationship between predictors and log odds or predefined transformations. So example use cases: healthcare, predicting disease risk where probability rises steeply at certain cholesterol or blood pressure levels. Finance, credit risk scoring, where default likelihood changes nonlinearly with debt to income ratio. Retail marketing, purchase likelihood based on income, where effect plateaus at higher levels. Manufacturing quality, maybe I should have done a survey. What industry are you guys from? That was a rhetorical question. Probability of defect as a non-linear function of temperature or pressure. Again, what was common amongst all these use cases? The ability to capture complex, non-linear, or threshold effects automatically. There's now machine learning add-on to Visual Analytics, where it literally shows up not just one, not just two, but 6 machine learning algorithms. If you're able to resonate with my car analogy, should we call this our 6 cup holders? No, I don't think that does justice to machine learning. How about 6 USB ports? I don't think that does it justice either. How about 6 high-end speakers so that you can drive through the neighborhood listening to Metallica at high speeds? But in all sincerity, high level of each 6 of these. Bayesian network, for example, disease risk modeling, fault diagnosis, fraud detection. When to use? When modeling probabilistic dependencies and conditional relationships. Strengths, good for casual inference, handles missing data. Considerations, computational expensive, thus why the beauty, right, of the VIA architecture. Grid-like, in the sense that the more nodes you throw at us, the more cores you throw at us, the more RAM you throw at us, the more machine learning models such as this is possible. Suitable for small to medium data sets, moderate complexity relationships. Compare contrast factorization machines for something like product recommendations, ad click prediction, when modeling sparse data with high dimensional categorical features. Strength, capture interactions efficiently, ideal for recommendation systems. Considerations: less effective for small, dense data sets, sensitive to hyperparameters. Suitable for large, sparse data sets, high dimensional features. Compare contrast forest. For example, customer churn prediction, credit scoring, classification tasks. When you need robust, nonlinear prediction without heavy parameter tuning. Strength, handle categorical and numeric, resistant to overfitting. Less interpretable, but suitable for medium to large data sets, moderate to high complexity. Compare contrast gradient boosting. For example, risk scoring, sales forecasting, insurance claim prediction, when seeking high predictive accuracy for structured tabular data. Its strength, boosting reduces bias, can achieve very high accuracy. Prone to overfitting if not tuned, slower to train than single trees, however, suitable for medium to large data sets, complex patterns. Compare contrast neural networks. For example, image recognition, fraud detection, demand forecasting, when modeling complex, nonlinear patterns, including large data sets. Its strength, flexible, can handle continuous, categorical, image, or sequential data, although it requires large data sets, could be hard to interpret, can overfit without regularization. It's suitable for large data sets that are highly complex, non-linear. And then last but not least, support vector machine. When classification boundaries are complex but data is medium-sized, for example, spam detection, credit approval, medical diagnosis. Effective for small to medium data sets, works with kernels. And no, I'm not talking about Colonel Sanders. That's a different spelling. But basically mathematical functions that help organize data and make it easier to classify. Although not suitable for very large data sets, and although tuning kernel parameters can be tricky, it's suitable for small to medium data sets, medium complexity. Now, although the Q&A chat window is meant for just that Q&A, if people wouldn't mind sharing, it's going to be anonymous, and we won't publish it until we publish everything from this webinar. But I'm curious, what do any of you think about the ability to do click, click, click statistics, click, click, click machine learning, as opposed to coding in SAS, or dare I say, coding in open source, especially given the output of all these statistics and machine learning is automatically report dashboard ready, and they can be put in conjunction alongside report dashboard visuals to further enhance your data storytelling. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that, and we'll compile that anonymously and post it after today's webinar. But continuing onward, if you would be so inclined to embrace Model Studio, which is an environment that gives you a Visio-like process flow-like step-by-step predictive modeling process, SAS modeling alongside, dare I say, open source modeling, Visual Analytics will automatically allow you to take any model, even if it's not the champion model, and push it to that workflow process. In addition, you can register the model in a dev test prod, model scoring, integrate outside of SAS Viya type environment, and that whole process can start from Visual Analytics once a model is at hand. For any of these analytical capabilities, some of you may be wondering, and that's okay, well, I don't know if I want the Ted Stolarczyks of the world, that's me, by the way, self-deprecating humor, saying the ins and outs of these models. That's not for them. I just want them to be able to reuse, repurpose, and share. Well, you can with the template feature, even though templates also apply to things that have absolutely nothing to do with analytics. But you can package up and just send people like me with a click of a button what you ran, and I'll just rerun it in the reports that need to go production or dev test prod or ad hoc. Now, last but not least, with this 20 list anyway, you can dream up your own customized analytical innovation. For those of you who know SAS Studio for Viya well, or could know SAS Studio for Viya well, if you could dream it up there, click, 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 and or code, you can package it up black box manner and publish it to Visual Analytics, and it will literally integrate with the out-of-the-box visuals. Likewise, if you or someone in your organization knows JavaScript well, you need some header footer coding, another topic for another day, but that too can integrate with Visual Analytics, including the out-of-the-box visuals, and that is courtesy of something called data-driven content. Coming soon. In fact, you are the first public webinar audience, I'm pretty sure, that's hearing about this. Due out by year end, subject to change, Copilot, specifically for Visual Analytics, natural language interaction. Whether it's for analytics or something that has absolutely nothing to do with analytics. Speaking of which, especially for those of you who are seeing Visual Analytics for the first time, forgive me, I forgot to write down the numbers, so I forget what percentage it was, but regardless, by all means, even though I intentionally focus more on the A than the V, you can do V with minimal or no A for traditional dashboarding, reporting, data discovery, things of that nature. So with that, let's go ahead and I give you some live demo snippets of some of these capabilities. Interface, and in terms of getting started, this is also new, but it's not specific to analytics. I would have been stretching the definition. Among other things are getting started templates that come with the tool. You can create your own. You can decide what, if any, gets published to other users. Regardless how a visual was created, template, out of the box, custom. Regardless if it's one visual, collection of visuals, you can save, reuse, repurpose. Any filters you create, save, reuse, repurpose. Any entire page designs, save, reuse, repurpose. And although outside the scope of today, any data engineering you do within VA itself, save, reuse, repurpose. Now, although the slide deck was intentionally feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, let's try to demo this as a story. And it looks like to accommodate everyone's monitor size, my screen here is a little altered, so I will improvise. And what we're going to simulate is we have a request from the business. Home equity loans is above our 15% target of defaults. In fact, it's currently over 20. We need to figure out what's driving this and how to reverse it. Let's start off with typical dashboards and visuals. especially for my audience who's seeing VA for the first time. Among other things, display rules that not only tag, color code, make stand out what's critical, but the ability to schedule and automatically email individual or group of individuals that a threshold was met, and it'll point them not just to the report, but the page that has the criticality. So that, among other things, we can slice and dice and see what's happening to our loan defaults. But in terms of more data discovery, data analytics, similar to the previous release, our business people are saying in the current economic climate, certain job categories are being hit with layoffs more than others. Are loan default percentages higher for certain categories? Still, like the SAS 9.4 release, out-of-the-box visuals or auto charting. For example, I can do job classification category and bad loan percentages, and depending on what I clicked, data formats, the auto chart format is a certain specific way. I could change that to a completely different visual, or AI driven, click of a button, let the software suggest a visual for you. My existing SAS 9.4 users already know that what it's running behind the scenes, among other things, is a correlation matrix, so that we can accommodate our third request from the business. If you can look at other attributes to see if there's a relationship between each attribute and loan defaults. And as you might imagine, it's better to make this interactive. For example, different job classifications could change that correlation matrix, where we can look for, the old saying goes, correlation versus causation versus coincidence versus multicollinearity. I have my own way of describing multicollinearity. I call it the no-duh effect. Of course, cost and profit, revenue and profit is correlated, but the hope here is you find something you thought were multicollinearity and it's not, or vice versa. All of that is fine and dandy, but, and this is especially for the people seeing VA for the first time, before you even create a visual, just by selecting data items, you see this tag here. It's like a video game Easter egg. I'm like, kid, I don't even play video games. That proactively tells you you have correlate or could have correlation. But now, what are these other tags? My existing SAS 9.4 users aren't going to know about this yet. This relates to outliers. There are now 3 ways to look at outliers. The tried and true box plots, which, as you might imagine, is meant for more than just outliers. But now we have those, what I'm calling tongue-in-cheek video game Easter eggs. And as I said earlier, could impact aggregations such as min, max. You also may recall I said if you have at least one visual with a data item, with an outlier, you get this light bulb, and with a click of a button, it'll analyze it and give you a full story about that outlier. A summary, details, and its impact. Obviously, 0 is nothing. A low number is negligible. Well, easy for me to say, right? In real life, 3% could be very important, especially if we're talking about millions and billions of dollars, millions and billions of people. But now there's even new storytelling, our next request from the business. Are there any underlying factors causing the higher than acceptable level of loan defaults? Automated explanation. It's part of the visuals where you don't have to be a formal data scientist, compared where you could or should be, compared with, rightly so. These are meant for the true data scientist. But right, everything built here is automatically dashboard report format. So an automated explanation, I supply what I want to model or tell a story on. It grabs every other data item available to the report, minus filters, minus prompts. Now, a true data scientist would go into what I call from black box modeling to open box modeling. Or if you're someone like myself, you would pass the baton, as the saying goes. That person may start off at first with their own traditional reporting, dashboarding. They may do some analytics, such as forecasting. But what's new? Well, where we left off, what's new? The baton passing, automated explanation. But new for them, the data scientist, a reporting, dashboarding environment where without having to leave the report dashboarding environment, they can do things like the models I covered in my PowerPoint deck. Even though they may ultimately run model comparison, they may do gradient boosting first or only. For example, it's usually the default workhorse benchmark because in financial risk modeling, it usually outperforms a single tree. That's more practical than a neural network. With that said, they still may do a decision tree first or only to gain transparency, intuition, and baseline performance before escalating to more complex models. With that said, they still may do neural network first or only to probe whether complex nonlinear patterns exist in the loan default data, but then ultimately model comparison for the true champion model. And even though gradient boosting you may think is always the champion model, easy for me to say because it combines many small trees to capture complex patterns without losing stability, often makes for more effective modeling for predicting loan defaults. But recall earlier, I mentioned, among other things, all the new options, which I encourage you to click through and read through the doc. One of many, many examples, as you might imagine, the different fit statistics may or may not still make gradient boosting the champion model. But now that we know it's the champion model, we can push it to Model Studio and or push it to model management and or, ironically, I probably should have covered this in the PowerPoint deck, create what's called a store code to access it out of Viya through a third-party web app or push it to an underlying in database. But to the data storyteller, we could, among other things, derive a predicted value, probability value, push the data behind the model to that storyteller. So ultimately, they can look at further black box data science visualizations and or although visuals like this were possible in the older visual analytics, because of the tight integration with statistics and machine learning, they can look at the scoring results of the loan modeling and or perhaps most important, in terms of model scoring before any modeling versus after modeling, version 1 versus version 2 modeling? Did we improve in loan defaults as a whole, loan defaults by certain job categories, job types, and if perhaps the scored percentages got higher, maybe we have more false positives. If it's lower, possible false negatives, because ultimately for our business, particularly for the management, find out what the losses are, provide management with a prediction of the return value of our hard work. So with the probability values and probability data from the statistics machine learning models, again, the Ted Stolarczyks of the world just simply want to say, I have different loans, I have different job categories, I have different demographic aspects. Who, where, what are my critical loan aspects? For the more true bottom line, and by the way, I don't know if this is just me, nowadays it seems like everybody wants to talk cost ROI, extremely less, if any, revenue productivity improvements ROI. So in the case of presenting machine learning results to business people, among other things, change of market conditions. First, the obvious, right? We're in a post-COVID world, work from home world. Maybe not so obvious, and actually Netflix did this way before COVID, and others have done it post-COVID. The additional cost of engineering and maintenance may not justify the improvement in model accuracy. Or something like cost per customer in a modeling confusion matrix display. And any of you who have an accounting background in my audience, and at the same time have a statistical modeling background in my audience, I hope you eat this up, because wouldn't it be great if you can get to the point that say, here's what happens when we have true negatives versus false negatives versus false positives versus true positive. We can say, look, it's costing us or gaining us $1,000, $20,000, $500. Was $500 a big deal? Well, if you have thousands, millions, billions of whatever, it could mean a huge difference. Now, with all that said, how is generative AI going to make this better, special? So with that, I'm going to show you a pre-recorded video that was graciously given to me, permission from somebody, you'll see her name, in product management. And like I said, you were the first public webinar audience to see that. So without further ado,
Hello everyone, my name is Sasha Karpinski and I'm excited to walk you through a demo of SAS Viya Copilot in Visual Analytics. Today we'll be focused on the conversational chat aspect of the generative AI capabilities within Visual Analytics. Our goal is to transform how business users and analysts engage with their data and reports, making their work more productive than ever. Since this work is still in development, some of the features and the timing for release may change as we continue refining the product. With that, let's dive in. Let's start by opening our chat pane. Our first interaction is simple, yet powerful. Copilot loads the dataset I'm interested in and makes it ready for use. What's happening behind the scenes here is fascinating. The Copilot is interpreting my natural language request and, recognizing an actionable item, issues an underlying function call to open the related dataset. Now, let's tackle something a bit more complex. Copilot excels in report generation assistance. Instead of manually dragging and dropping visuals, let's ask it to create an entire dashboard for us. I'll select a prompt from our catalog, one that instructs the Copilot to create a meaningful and compelling dashboard. This is a multifaceted request that requires Copilot to use function chaining. Complex prompts like this one require a number of sequential function calls to be completed, forming a chain of operations. This dashboard is a great starting point, but the real power comes in iteration. Let's make some adjustments. First, instead of just looking at historic data, I want to apply some predictive analytics and forecast my inventory stock given cost development. Great. I wonder whether the system can help make both the visualization and the data item it uses a bit more understandable. Perfect. Now let's see whether we can find some better descriptive titles for our visuals. It's all about making the dashboard visually appealing and easy to read. Now let's refine the aesthetics of our pie chart. This request highlights the Copilot's ability to handle aesthetic changes. The system intelligently applies a nice blue gradient color scheme and turns on the category labels, reflecting individual pie slices. But what about data selection or filtering? Maybe I'm not interested in products sold on the East Coast for my pie chart. Let's let Copilot do the work for me. Copilot processes this request by intelligently adjusting the data subset visualized in the pie chart. This shows its ability to understand and execute data filtering instructions seamlessly based on conversational input. One of the most powerful capabilities is asking Copilot to help understand the visuals. Looking at our forecast chart, I might wonder about trends. Here, Copilot moves beyond generating visuals. It's looking at the underlying data to determine any interesting facts about the chart, such as seasonality or spikes. This is where AI truly acts as an intelligent assistant, providing insights that you might otherwise spend time extracting manually. Copilot provides an explanation of the cost trend, pointing out specific patterns. This moves beyond simple visualization to genuine data interpretation. We can add that insight as a text visual, summarizing the historic cost patterns complete with highlighted sections. This streamlines the creation of executive summaries or key takeaways. Now, what about additional, more complex visuals to enhance this dashboard? Let's ask for a geographical view. For those familiar with visual analytics, you'll appreciate the difficulty in a request like this. The model not only has to add the actual geographical map to the canvas, but it also has to automatically convert a standard categorical item like zip code to a geographical item. This level of intelligent data transformation is a testament to the Copilot's capabilities. Now let's consider existing brand or theme requirements. What if you have an existing report or an image with a color styling you like? Let's try to apply a theme from an external image to our new geomap. I'll select an image I just downloaded from a SAS Hackathon event announcement and prompt the Copilot. Processing this image takes a bit longer because the model has to utilize its vision capabilities to extract relevant color information for us. This is a prime example of multimodal AI in action, moving beyond just text to interact with visual data. So far, every action I've triggered has resulted in a direct change to the report canvas. But what if I'm not sure what visual I need yet and want to discuss details with the Copilot first? Let's ask it to preview a visual. This allows for an iterative design process. I can now further ask the system to fine-tune this butterfly chart or decide to add this visual to my report if I'm happy with the preview. This is about providing flexibility and control to the user before committing changes to the main report. This report is almost ready, but it lacks the interactivity I'm looking for. Let's see if Copilot can help. The Copilot makes the necessary connections to enable interactivity. Now, selecting a bar will automatically filter or highlight related data and other visualizations. This makes the report more dynamic and useful for deeper exploration. This dashboard is now truly ready for distribution and consumption by my coworkers. As you can see, the Copilot significantly enhances productivity and allows users to achieve complex tasks using simple natural language. You've just seen a great example of how Copilot can assist you during the report building process. But users might also want to use visual analytics for the purposes of data exploration. Imagine you're a data analyst getting a request from a different business unit. You might not know the ins and outs of their data and might need to spend some time understanding the data before building an analysis. Copilot can help you with that too. Copilot recognizes that one of the best ways to understand the distribution of a measure is with a histogram chart. When asked for a detailed analysis, Copilot suggests meaningful insights revealing the spread of the data, areas of data concentration, and a few potential outliers to look into. Copilot can apply information from this histogram as a new filter in a different visualization analyzing loans by job area. This level of granular control, through natural language, is a significant leap forward in productivity for the end user during their data exploration. Finally, Copilot seamlessly launches into the creation of an automated explanation visual when asked about key drivers of loans in default, understanding that this is the most efficient way to discover influential factors and relationships related to defaulted loans. We now have a better grasp on this data thanks to Copilot's assistance.
Okay, with that, in conclusion, although, as I alluded to, or more than alluded to, that you can use visual analytics with very minimal, if any, analytical capabilities, the more the analytical capabilities you incorporate in your reports, the more value you'll get out of visual analytics, and the more innovative you will be within the organization. So with that, I thank you for attending from dashboard to autopilot, and we will take any parting unanswered questions, comments at this time.
All right, on to our first question here. Someone's saying, can we give path to SAS data sets to pick data for visualization, and what formats data can be loaded off? PDF, SAS DS, images, etc.
Yes, so well, first, the traditional row column level data. If by chance you happen to be familiar with the SAS access concept, so that same concept still applies to VIA. You know, databases, on-premise, cloud, those sources are different if you're in a 9.4 only world. But just as SAS 9.4 Visual Analytics required the data to be in memory first, that still holds true for Visual Analytics for VIA, though it's a different in-memory architecture, another conversation for another day. The person also asked about non-traditional data, such as like PDFs. So that gets in the world of text processing. VA itself does have some text analytics, text topics. You know, ironically, I didn't cover that. But in terms of being able to read and process those text documents in a format that then could be pushed to VA, I will have to admit that would require the visual text analytics add-on.
Gotcha. Thank you. Quick Q&A today. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. On behalf of myself, Ted, and all of SAS, we really hope they enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.